Okay.
Welcome everyone to another one of our live Q&A sessions. I'm Jamie and am joined by Ashley, my co-host.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the November Insiders Q&A.
Ashley, how was Thanksgiving?
It was fabulous. We had our first turkey in isolation, and it was outstanding. So now we're dining off of the leftovers of an 18-pound turkey for 2 people. How was yours?
I did 20 pounds for 4 people, but actually I delivered it for 2. So it was just the 2 of us eating the meal, and then my mother and son were eating it separately from us.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It looks like Adriana's with us. We've got a couple people tuning in. So yeah, Thanksgiving, it felt very strange, but it was nice to just sort of nest and be here. I made some pies. They turned out fine, but if I was on the Great British Baking Show, they would tell me that the crusts were a bit raw. So I'm going to try again in a couple days.
Do you need to pre-bake the crusts before you put the filling in?
No, they were just frozen.
Oh.
Frozen pie crusts that I put them in the group in a thread, and they looked really good. So I've just been scraping the pumpkin filling out of the raw pie crust.
Well, I did something similar, but I just did it like a custard. I did the pie filling, but didn't use a crust.
Ooh.
And it turned out great.
That sounds awesome.
I made a double recipe and I ended up freezing one. I don't know if that's going to work out, but we'll see.
It can't be bad. I mean, it has all the good things: pumpkin, sweetened condensed milk, right?
And then the whipped cream, freshly whipped cream to go on top.
Beautiful. I did that too. It was the best part of the whole thing. So just a quick reminder, if you haven't done this yet, please go to this URL and give StreamYard permission to show us your name and Facebook photo, because we see all of your comments, but if you haven't yet done this, it just shows up as Facebook user. So we're not entirely sure who we are talking to. It might kick you off the live when you do that, but just come on right back and we'll get started here in a second. This is what it is right now. In case you were wondering, this is what we're talking about. Okay, I'm ready when you are.
Oh, I'm ready.
Let's get to it.
All right. So the Thanksgiving holiday is past, but the consequences of how we spend our Thanksgiving may not have passed us already.
That is very true. I am too.
And to give some context to this, here in California, we had our governor announce in a press conference that there will be drastic action, and I quote, drastic action taken if the numbers warrant it. So I think that's a precursor to some significant restrictions that we can expect again. And I'm sure that our state will not be the only one going through this.
Well, that's one of the things we talked about back when, was it the first shutdown? Was it the second shutdown? I don't even remember anymore. That we're so focused on, not we as insiders, but just in general, I think as an industry, we were so focused on how dare our governor do this? How dare our board do this? And the whole time I was saying, why aren't we focused more on the client population that's not wearing masks, not social distancing, not doing the stuff that would put us back into our jobs in a more permanent way sooner rather than later? And so, it's just not feasible at this point, but we as an industry are going to reap the ramifications of it for months and months.
I did my best to model behavior. In communication with my clients, talking about what our holiday plans are, and not because I was thinking all the while, what are you doing that's going to put me at risk? But now that's exactly what I'm thinking. What have you done over the holiday weekend in particular that's going to put me at risk?
Yes. And by extension, your business and other clients. And the dominoes just keep falling. And so I don't think that there's really going to be any kind of change of behavior at this point. I mean, nothing's changed in the past 8 months. So I don't, is it 9 months now? I don't fully expect that we're going to run into any kind of big epiphany. So it's really just about how we can be proactive as business owners to try to mitigate some of that risk, but it's impossible. And I think we touched on it during our podcast episode about preparing for the next shutdown and what we can be doing to be proactive. And so I would love for you to share some of the ways that you and I have discussed privately that you're being proactive in preparing for that eventuality. But for you in California, this is much more real, I think, than for anybody else right now.
And we're day to day in terms of what we're going to be allowed to do. In the past, the changes that were made in restrictions were done on a weekly basis. They were announced, and Tuesdays would be like the day that we'd watch to see whether our county was able to move beyond the worst possible tier. My county has never moved beyond the worst. I mean, we've been stuck in the purple zone, which is the worst zone the entire time. So it wasn't like we had something and it got taken away from us. We've been here this entire time. What did benefit us was that at the point that nail salons were given permission to be open in all tier levels, that meant that no matter how bad it got, we'd still be open as long as the governor did not institute a stricter restriction. And that's the thing that we're facing down now as a possibility, and a very strong possibility, because as these numbers come in and the hospitalization rates go up and the capacity goes down, we're concerned, everyone should be, that we're not going to have the capacity to handle the COVID cases and then just all the other people that need to go to the hospital.
And I'm hopeful, in your case, at least being in California, even though it is Northern California, that you're not going to be up against some of the challenges that I think we'll be up against in the Midwest and on the East Coast, where things get a lot colder over the next 3 or 4 months. And there's really once we're kind of hibernating and indoors and forced air, HVAC and stuff like that, I don't really foresee there being a reprieve from this. The numbers are just going to go up. We're going to see in a couple of weeks what happened because of Thanksgiving. We're going to see what happened because of travel. And I think we have to prepare ourselves mentally for this spike, but also prepare our businesses at the same time.
Part of my preparation, Ashley, was thinking about this question, is whether I or anyone else who's in my position where we're seeing clients, should we refuse to provide services to clients who've traveled for the Thanksgiving holiday, especially if we know that they've been interacting with different family groups? And I've had a number of clients do this, and they were honest in telling me about that, but they didn't seem that concerned that they would be endangering themselves or endangering me upon their return.
Well, I would, to Jeanette's point, I would love for you to recap today's press conference, because I know you're speaking about specifically what happened as far as the warning from Governor Newsom today and what you think that's going to look like in the next week or so, because there's definitely rumblings of some type of potential further restriction.
I think what people need to understand was that up until a couple of weeks ago, the state map that was color-coded according to what tier level each county was in was multicolored. And now it's almost all purple, which means almost every county is at the worst possible position in this pandemic. And so when there's talk of more restrictions, we already had a curfew put in place. Well, that doesn't really affect how I operate my business because I'm not doing nails at midnight. So that wasn't really an issue. And I'm curious to know whether or not those restrictions are going to come through and shut everything down, or they're going to go sector by sector and perhaps say that in this case, if we were to be so blessed, salons have not proven to be a place where people are getting the virus. And we trust salon owners and licensees to keep themselves safe and keep their clients safe. So we're not going to shut them down. We don't know yet what that looks like. We don't know what information they're using And even today, I believe Dr. Galley was not willing to name sectors or identify sectors in terms of what their transmission rates are. So we know they have that information, and we know that they're likely to act on it. They're not going to share that information with us other than through the restrictions.
And the last we'd had heard as far as major developments and what's going on in California was that salons were able to open indoors no matter the tier, whether you were in gold, it was a golden, saffron yellow, I don't even know, then or red or purple. But I think if you can kind of, we've learned what happened before with the additional shutdown that happened, was that back in July? So let's look into the crystal ball here. We know that a lot of people traveled for Thanksgiving or gathered for Thanksgiving that they shouldn't have done. We know that the numbers are going to go up. It's just a matter of how high at this point. And given the warning that Governor Newsom gave today, I foresee there being some type of ramification. Do we know exactly what that is? No. We each, you have your spies in the know that can give us information maybe 5 minutes before the public gets it. But we know that something's potentially coming. We were kind of tipped off to that earlier today, but what that looks like, we don't know. I think it's just smart to kind of talk about being proactive and understanding that if this is coming, what steps to prepare can you take? And I would just direct everybody back to our preparing for the next shutdown episode. I think we talk a little bit about operational things that you can do to get ready for something like that. But I don't know, I don't want to be like all doom and gloom here. But I also think that it might be a little bit naive to think that there isn't going to be some type of further action in the next month.
It makes me think that we should have taken 2 weeks off after Thanksgiving, and just in order for all of that to wash itself out. I mean, if we had planned to be closed for 2 weeks so that no matter what someone did over the holiday, it's not likely that they'd come back and be in a position to infect us. But I'll be at work tomorrow because nothing happened today that would restrict me from being at work tomorrow. And understand too that at the county level, LA County has already implemented more restrictions than any other county in our state. And that's because, of course, those local orders have more weight than the state orders. The local health officials know what's happening in their own area, and they can impose even stricter regulations. I say regulations. They're not regulations. They're restrictions, because they're not law in the same sense that they've gone through a process, other than health officials do have a lot of authority. And what I find interesting is that for the restrictions, even though they might be imposed at the county level, it's the mayors that get most of the blowback. So right now, Eric Garcetti, who's the mayor of Los Angeles, is getting a lot of grief about what's happening in LA County, even though it wasn't his work or his order that has slowed everything down there.
Sure. Yeah, there were, I think the restrictions in LA, and forgive me because I'm not there, but it had to do more with aesthetic services and what can be accomplished with or without a mask on the client. So, and Amanda just brought up a really great point here. I'm just going to put her comment on the screen here. Even if we did take 2 weeks off, it would just mean people would stay out of town longer, bringing around more people. It's correct. I think we have to really be, we have to understand that this is a lowest common denominator situation, and we're only as safe as the most risky behavior that's happening. It's unfortunate, but that's where we're at. Yay. Just FYI, feel free to drop any questions or things you want us to discuss into the comments here. We're very eager to talk about what you want to hear and what you want to discuss, whether it's a question about what we're talking about right now, or maybe a previous live class, if you got hung up creating GIFs or what have you. This is freewheeling, open-ended. Did you want to talk about, Jamie, the question that we received about advertisements recruiting beauty pros to work for mobile beauty apps, which we are on record just loving so much. Are on-demand apps or services provided outside licensed establishments legal? What about COVID and the labor issues surrounding that?
Yeah, so this has come up again. We've noticed that more and more apps, I at one point was keeping a list of all of the different ones because they keep popping up, these different on-demand apps that would provide a beauty professional to come to your home or to your office, more likely your home these days with COVID. But these keep popping up, and it just seems like the message does not get through to these apps that unless that's allowed in that particular state, it's not legal. It's not legal for the licensee to put themselves in that position to be dispatched to somebody's home. So it's frustrating that we've been dealing with this for 5 years, at least. And the message doesn't seem to get through to the licensees. It doesn't get through to consumers, and it certainly hasn't gotten through to these people who see an opportunity. Of course, one person's opportunity is another person's unlicensed activity. And since I'm always focused on regulations, I recognize it for what it is. It's unlicensed activity.
Sure. I think there's this assumption that because there's this very official app and that you can sign up or that you've been actively recruited by them. I fell down that rabbit hole and did several on-demand services. Now, thankfully, in Illinois, mobile services are legal. There's a lot of different, then you have the question beyond legality, who's liable? What does that look like? And if we were to take what's happening again in California with things like AB5 and what Uber and Lyft are doing, they're showing that they're trying to create this kind of separate category of not quite an independent contractor, but not quite an employee, only when it benefits them. And that's a precedent that's being set that I think we have to really pay attention. If you're not in California, if you're still using these on-demand beauty apps, first of all, are you exposing yourself to a potential situation where you could be losing your license or being fined? And then secondly, God forbid, what happens if you have some kind of poor results, somebody gets hurt, somebody, you're in their home or their workplace, so they trip over your bag, what have you. There's just, I think, more questions than there are answers for sure.
And I wouldn't put myself in a position to be misclassified. And I think that's exactly what these apps do, is that they can't survive without misclassifying the people who are actually providing the service. It's your tools, it's your equipment, all your products, and you're getting yourself there. So it's your transportation that you're providing. And then, I don't see how there's any way that works unless you are employed, especially here in California. Well, it doesn't work personally. At all.
I was in a car accident and I was injured on my way to a job for a mobile beauty service app. They said, oops, that stinks. We'll let your clients know you're not going to be there. And I went to the hospital. I had a neck injury. I was in physical therapy for months. I actually had to stop working. We're like, you're getting worse because if you continue to do nails while you're doing this, literally hoisting people's legs up next to a desk in an office. Ridiculous. But also things like that do happen. I can speak to that personally. And there was absolutely no ownership taken. And thankfully I was in the back of a cab that was actually operating for Uber at the time. So double layers of indemnity here. And thankfully we were able to, go through legal channels to get that settled. But it was very eye-opening.
I urge everyone who's watching to understand what the laws are in your state. I mean, you should not have to question that. You should already know. And if you find any of those solicitations online, please send them our way, because I love to gather the data. It just helps me, and Ashley as well, prove to legislators that the message is not getting through when these apps advertise, now operating in New York and California and Florida, or the more states and cities that they add, the more likely that they're not operating legally.
Well, and this question also brought up the question of influencers promoting educational opportunities that are targeted at licensed and unlicensed people. And so what is the, what's your ethical obligation if you're going to be a licensed professional, kind of touting and trying to get people to sign up for classes that are definitely out of their scope of practice if they're not licensed, and just promoting more illegal activity. And so really think about what your exposure is. I mean, in my situation with this whole thing with this car accident, Uber pushed it back on the cab company, and thankfully they were insured. So if that had been me injuring someone, you absolutely know that that on-demand app would push it back to me, and I better have liability insurance to protect me for that. So there's just so many fun layers to these problems. But yeah, definitely shoot us a tip in our DMs or email us or comment in the group. We would love to talk more about it.
Absolutely. So also related to our experiences going through this coronavirus pandemic is that I know state boards are receiving many more complaints than they ever have before, many of them coming from fellow licensees reporting on licensees who are operating out of their homes when they're not supposed to be. So with salons being closed down or people not feeling safe going into a salon environment, we're seeing a lot of activity across all the different disciplines. So it's not just hair people doing it, it's nails, it's skincare, it's massage. I've heard about that as well. So the question is here is, because these reports have come through, and it's probably even more widespread than the state regulators realize, what impact is that going to have on our industry that this is happening? Will that trend reverse itself once we get to a point where we can get back into our salons and be reasonably confident that we're not going to be shut down again? And will that impact the effort to deregulate us somehow?
Well, there seems to be these two camps where we feel like, I don't know, this strange loyalty to other beauty professionals, no matter what type of behavior they partake in or participate in, whether it's unlicensed activity, mobile services that are not legal, that, you can't disrespect the hustle that way. But I feel that this is creating unfair competition for the businesses that are being compliant by being either shut down or operating at limited capacity, when you can just go to Kelly's house and get your, hydrofacial in her garage. So I will say I have absolutely reported people working out of scope mobile in states that are not allowed to do so. It's led to some unpleasant DM requests on Instagram, and some blockings that have had to happen. But here's the thing. I am only as strong as, again, the lowest or weakest link in our chain here. And so whatever decisions this person is making, and I'm not going to begrudge someone for trying to support their family, but there are legal ways to do this. And so if we're going to fight deregulation tooth and nail the way we have been up until now, how can we let this slide as well?
Right, because at that point, what difference does it make whether the person has a license or not? I mean, how is that really any better to say, well, I have a license, I know better, but I'm still operating out of my garage?
Yeah, there's no difference in my mind. And I know this is not a black and white situation as far as feelings and not wanting to hurt another professional or hurt their business. This isn't a matter of like reporting someone who's doing something out of scope so that you can get all of their clients or whatever. That's not what this is. This is protecting your license and your livelihood by making sure that the people who would take advantage of, whether it be a loophole or just straight up illegal activity, that is as big of a threat to me as a deregulation bill. But you and I are all about compliance. That's why we started this podcast. That's why we started this group. And so I think that is not earth-shattering news that I would take that kind of a position.
Well, this is my thought. If you aren't going to regulate yourself, like if I convinced myself that it was okay, somehow I rationalized doing this, that's on me, right? If I allow others to if I don't hold others accountable to it, my colleagues, then I feel like that's on me too. And then we have it at the industry-wide level, and then people get upset that regulators are cracking down on us. Well, if we each could regulate ourselves and be compliant, we wouldn't need to regulate each other or have the government regulate us. But that's just not what happens. So at some point, someone has to be held accountable. And I know our podcast today was all about being accountable to the regulations and the laws. And, I think it does start with us. And I know there are others in this group of insiders who received an email from our state board executive director asking us for examples of individuals advertising their services. And it is so brazen. I mean, it's so easy to just go. My favorite place to go was Craigslist, because people can be super creative on Craigslist about how they advertise. And just one after another person just popped up that was offering services completely in an unlicensed way, in that they may have held a personal license, but because they were operating out of their homes and when they're not allowed to, that was definitely not legal.
Well, to your point about regulation and accountability, the episode today with Assemblywoman Cruz out of New York, I think that's going to be a pretty hot button issue in the next 12 to 18 months, is having to write a law to enforce the laws that already exist around labor, worker exploitation, fair minimum wage, the tipped workers. I mean, New York's got a whole bunch of other stuff going on. But to create a system of accountability wherein nail salon owners have to report income, earnings, taxes, time cards. I mean, there's really actually going to be some oversight. And again, Assemblywoman Cruz spoke to that unfair competition, that if someone's doing something right and they have to charge accordingly in order to make the correct margin by being clean and paying people a fair wage, it's not fair for someone to just be able to totally undercut that entire effort.
Right. And that's why in any of these situations, I think there are groups on either side of the issue. If you want to think of it in terms of workers versus owners, or the licensed versus the unlicensed, if everyone can agree on a standard and think that that's what's best for the industry as a whole, there's no reason why we can't create broad-based support for those kinds of things. And maybe that's what it's going to take in the immediate situation. And then maybe over time, it won't become as necessary anymore. Maybe those, or, maybe those restrictions, those requirements get imposed on other types of beauty businesses. Maybe it's going to be so successful that they'll have the opportunity to tackle other parts of our industry where those problems exist, but aren't as obvious.
Yes, not as obvious. Street commission comes to mind.
Yes.
Where, just if you don't have a client, you're not getting paid. That was my first salon experience. And it took me 2 weeks to realize, how does this work? Like, how are you actually making any money? I'm taking home 40% of a $12 manicure service. No. And I was actually a W-2 employee in that salon, which is, it was like a really strange animal. But when you mention a standard, the standard has already been set. It's written into law. And so what a low bar to clear. I mean, the bar is underground. If just meeting the requirements of the very general, very, entry level laws, as far as paying people minimum wage and, not human trafficking, like, no wonder sometimes our industry is really viewed with such a side eye, because if we have to show our work and be babysat into following the law, like, that's sad. So I hope that there's a big change that comes out of this.
That was absolutely in my mind. I thought it's not just that you have the correct answers. You do literally need to show your work and prove on an ongoing basis that what you're doing is legitimate.
I'm going to make a note to myself. We can drop in the bill text of the actual proposed law that Assemblywoman Cruz proposed in New York. It's kind of died in committee, but she says she's going to reintroduce it next year. and it's pretty interesting. But I don't know. I feel like on opposite sides of the country, we have these two completely different prevailing attitudes about labor and what fair labor is. There's people in California that are saying, I want to work for Uber and Lyft because I don't actually work for Uber and Lyft. And then in New York, you've got people on the total other side of the spectrum that are being exploited. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it shows a lot of the divides happening in our country right now without getting into specifics. So, yay.
There was a recent board meeting here in California where we were, as the audience listening in, aware that they are updating their sunset review information. And what I found was interesting was that when asked if there were any regulations that needed to be changed or something new that needed to be introduced to deal with the pandemic, the response initially is no, which I'm shocked that there is nothing. There's nothing that needs to be changed in order to make us more pandemic proof, as it were. I'm really surprised. There is an upcoming health and safety committee meeting where I think we're going to come up with a different answer to that question, because I am sure when we take a deep dive into what was helpful and what was useless throughout this process, we're going to find that there are changes that need to be made.
Definitely. Jeanette, I'd love for you to clarify what you mean about fine line with independent jobs. I agree. I love being able to be an independent contractor when I'm on set. If somebody comes at me with a W-4, I'm like, no. I'm independent. You 1099 me. You don't withhold anything. But there's just so much bad information out there about the protections and, if you're an LLC, and it's like, it seems like Jamie and I were talking about this earlier today. It seems like the people who have the worst information and the lack of qualifications are the ones who are just freely sharing of it, that are like, you don't actually have to declare any income from retail you sell. It's like, who told you that? How did you get
pure profit?
It's pure profit. Like, I can imagine thinking like something on a service or an upsell or whatever is pure profit, but retail, when you have to lay down money to get that product in the first place, it boggles the mind.
And you have to record any sales tax, and you have to pay the sales tax. Oh, my goodness.
And you have to have, a sales and a certificate to be able to pure profit. I think we should maybe get some insiders t-shirts made that just say pure profit. It's pure profit.
We should be retailing a lot more if that's the case. If I don't have to pay taxes on that money, I need to up my retail game.
Okay, so Jeanette says, some of us can't afford to employ people, but can split the rent with other individuals. Yeah, that's a straight up independent contractor situation that sounds legal, as long as everybody knows what they're getting into. But yeah, as far as what's happening in New York, these are people that are, it's just it's like, take a situation and think about how it could be made worse, and then take that 500 levels down. And that's what a lot of the nail technicians in New York are up against. Misclassification, all of it.
And she made it clear that that wasn't a place where booth rental was a predominant model at all.
Right, exactly. Booth rental's not even legal in New Jersey. So it's not something that you typically see, especially in nails. That's just not the deal. AB5 makes that illegal.
Yeah. I think I know what we're talking about there. If you are in California, if you were sharing a space with someone else, and there's one person's name on the establishment license,
yes,
because that person is the lead person, then you've got to make sure that everything that you're doing, whenever there's a second person in your space, whoever that person is, you have to be AB5 compliant. When you work alone, you don't need to worry about it, because there are no workers. There's no one to have a relationship with other than your clients, and AB5 has nothing to do with your clients. So yes, if there's a second person in your space, or a third or a fourth or 50th, those arrangements, those relationships need to be AB5 compliant.
Definitely. Fun twists and turns with that one. Yikes. Okay. So next question we have here. When is the next live in-person beauty show?
I was asked that through a private message. And I think it was someone being really hopeful about, in other words, Jamie, what are you planning for the next year? Because normally I would have a calendar laid out. I would have already submitted classes. I would have gotten approvals, possibly. Yeah, I would have already gotten approvals for something that was happening at the end of January, which of course that would have been the ICE show, and that's been moved to March, and it's been made a virtual event. The Chicago show, they're doing two different events. One is going to be a virtual event in April, and then they're planning an in-person event, I believe, in September. We know that Premier Orlando moved from having their in-person normal show in June, and they pushed it off to October. So that makes me wonder if they're going to be doing shows, 3 different shows in October. If they're going to be doing Orlando, Birmingham, and Columbus. I feel for that staff if that's what's happening. Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like the next live in-person beauty show is a bit of a pipe dream. I don't know. I think probably the next one's going to be happening next summer, right? Hell or high water. So I don't know. And how do people feel about attending an in-person beauty show? And I think maybe a lot of it depends on where it is, how big it is. You have the exhibitors, you have all of that setup, you have the teams working the booths, you have all the attendees, you have classrooms. Like there's just so many different environments to think about.
And the travel to get there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And even if the planes are a safe environment due to their ventilation, you still have to get there. You still have to get through an airport and through security and all of those things. And so you
still have to use a bathroom. You still have to eat. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm just telling myself I am taking a year's sabbatical from traveling, and that'll come pretty quickly because it's been since March.
Yeah.
For me. And yeah. So
for me, yeah.
Yep.
We were in New York. We were going to the beauty experience up until about 12 hours before it started.
What an experience it was.
Oh man, that was an evening. That sure was an evening.
I think a lot of these show organizers will be cautious about this because there's so much on the line for them. I think that these events could be make or break for their businesses. The event planning is not what it used to be, obviously.
No.
Just look at the magazines. Look how thin the magazines have gotten. What little, what few are actually still being published on paper. I mean, just the money is not flowing to advertising, and that would be, one of the reasons why a company would participate in a show in person would be to get in front of people, but not if it's dangerous.
Yeah, and virtual shows, I haven't really been blown away by anything that's been happening virtually. I think ICE is really going to be the first test of what that looks like, a virtual show on a large scale versus just something that a brand is putting together or a family of brands. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable going to a beauty show. Not now, not in 6 months. That's just my own personal feelings on it. Only because there's just so much risk involved for, I think, very little reward at this point. Because what do we go to beauty shows for? We go for education, we go for trend information, we go for shopping. A lot of that can be achieved virtually. And so I just don't know if there's a cost benefit analysis that needs to happen. And I don't see the benefit yet.
There's one thing that will not happen that I won't miss, and that's having someone run over my toes with their rolling cart that they're not supposed to have on the show floor. I can do that to myself, actually. I can get the experience, but yeah,
I'm so far away from the ground, I never see them. I'm always tripping and falling.
Oh my goodness. Well, and I thought, okay, so anymore, if you go to enough shows, during the course of the year, you spend very little time on the show floor. I mean,
Yeah.
or you'd go really early when it's not as crowded. But can I count the number of shows where I have attended and have only been in my classroom and not gone on the show floor at all? Like just literally made a beeline to my classroom, set up, did my class and got out. And I thought, could I make that happen? Well, it would depend on the layout of the room and how everyone was behaving in the room. And, there's just logistic things that the show would have to do in order to make it safe. And, I just don't think we're there yet. But then on the other side of things, with the virtual show, I'm more concerned about, and, we've had our share of technological difficulties. Are they going to try to pull some of this stuff off live? Are they going to have people pre-record their classes and submit them? I will say that a recent call for classes, which I had submitted to earlier, their show got canceled, wanted us to submit our classes in advance. And I thought, no way am I doing that for a show that I had never taught at before, because I don't trust them to not just use that information however they please, rather than just using it as a one-time presentation during the virtual show weekend. So I'm very protective of my content because it's mine. I'm not presenting something that my manufacturer told me to present. So it's a different situation.
It is.
I don't know what that's going to look like.
Exactly. Well, as independent educators, we own our content. And so virtually there's those other considerations to make about usage and ownership and all those other things. So yeah, it's not without challenges, definitely. Neither you nor I allow recording in our classrooms. And so the screen recording is a thing, and it's not like we're splitting the atom here in these classes, but it is information that we think the people who have paid and traveled and made the commitment to be in that classroom should have first. So it's going to be very interesting for sure.
Oh my goodness. I want to comment on Jeanette's comment about AB5. I think we could do a whole episode about AB5 at some point in the future, because there will be some things upcoming. And I happen to be a huge fan of our exemption in AB5, because I think it makes it clearer than it has ever been what's legal and what's not. So I happen to be a fan. I'm not thrilled that our exemption related to being a manicurist is going to be sunsetted if we don't get that changed. So that's what I'll be working on for next year, is to make sure that the exemption continues for all licensees for the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology in the state of California. And understand too that, given the results of the recent election, that what happened with us here in California with AB5 and just with labor in general, we may be looking at some federal actions that are going to accelerate this process across the United States faster than we had ever thought possible. So whether it's getting rid of the sub-minimum wage or the tipped wage situation where that happens in states, just raising the minimum wage, there are a lot of things that can happen at the federal level that will affect many more people than just those that are looking at it and saying, oh, well, that's California, I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
So we'll save that for maybe January or February, because that's when we're going to start seeing the new bills being introduced that will deal with this problem.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I always gain a lot of insight whenever there's an AB5 conversation. I can tell you that there are interest groups that are already starting independent Illinois. I'm seeing sponsored tweets. I'm seeing they're prepared for this fight to be coming to Illinois very soon. And so I think we all just have to think about what side we're on, but also dispelling any myths in the process and just really figuring out like what this operationally does look like, and the pros and cons of it, just like anything else. Now, as far as vaccines in the works, sure. That's definitely coming down the pike. I'll be first in line. Unfortunately, there's no timeline on that. And we don't know what these have been rushed to market. I get a flu shot every year. I'm happy to get a vaccine. I am all for them. I believe in science. But I also understand that being a 40-year-old woman in Chicago does not put me high on the list to receive one. So plus, the only thing that makes a vaccine work is when everybody does it. And we know that that's not going to happen. So without getting too political, I don't rely on herd immunity because it's not a thing with COVID. And unfortunately, I think that's a great point though, Jeanette. And I love the participation. I just don't think it's something that's going to happen before June, unfortunately.
No. Yeah, that's not politics. That's just science and taking the temperature, to use that phrase, of the population as a whole. You already had people who were not very confident in any sort of vaccination regime anyway, and you just compound that with everything else, and it's worrisome. And it may come down to a situation where maybe the only clients that I allow into the salon can prove that they've been vaccinated.
Oh boy, yeah. And then we're living in an Amazon original series. The whole conversation makes me uncomfortable only because I feel like there's no answers, there's nothing definitive, and I am encouraged, but I am cautiously optimistic. How about that?
I've used that phrase a lot.
I do.
We both do. We both do. Well, and today, let me just point out that Governor Newsom did sort of lay out a timeline for when the first doses of vaccine would come. And I believe, don't quote me, I think it was like 370,000 doses for a state of 40 plus million people. Again, we don't know what those priorities are going to look like, but we're told that we're going to get more information on it later this week, what the timeline is, and then who will be prioritized. And I can imagine it will be those frontline healthcare workers.
As it should be. Absolutely. Let's switch gears here to a great question that Erin posted in the group. I want to make sure with the 13 minutes left here that we give this a good amount of coverage. Saying that she had a tech begin September 4th. She has recently resigned. Is this something you announce officially to clients, since there are clients who preferred this tech? Help, please.
Oh, and when I saw Erin's post, I wanted to start typing, and I'm a horrible typist. Anyone who's seen me type knows that. And I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to address this question, because it is such a great question. What do you do if someone leaves? And I think there are so many circumstances under which someone leaves that this person has resigned. I think that's a plus, because there are some times where someone leaves and they just sort of ghost the salon owner, right? They just sort of not show up. And then you don't know, are they sick? Are they coming back? Are they communicating with their clients? What's happening? And also, if I'm understanding this correctly, I believe Erin has employees, right? It's not someone who's said, I'm not renewing my lease, or I'm giving you 30 days notice, I'm not paying rent anymore. This is someone who is actually an employee of yours. So in this case, depending on how many clients were committed to this particular person and how far in advance they were committed to them, I'm not sure how much advanced planning you do with standing appointments. I don't think it's necessarily something that you need to bring up in an email. I think it's the sort of thing that when someone contacts you to make their next appointment that you mention, or dealing with those clients that are already on her schedule now is the main priority, because they do need to be alerted. You don't want to surprise them the day of that they show up and then all of a sudden their person's not there anymore. And it's quite possible that this person has already made a huge announcement on social media. Who knows? I don't know who this person is, and you would know best whether or not other announcements have been made, or perhaps they've moved to a different salon. If that person were still working nearby, I'm of the mind that you are in a much better position to be very honest about the fact that they are somewhere else, and you can even tell them where they are, because you have to have enough confidence in your services and your customer service that you can compete with that. But if they want to go follow that person, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. My answer was more along the lines of, just reaching out to those clients individually, letting them know the situation, and then just offering them some type of incentive to stay. Who knows why a client makes the decision that they do as far as preference, whether it's a different bedside manner, they do a longer massage, whatever. That's neither here nor there, I guess. To me, client retention, especially right now, is super important. And so, you and I are on that no discount train forever. But I think a discounted upsell, as far as, hey, we'll give you a free paraffin or we'll add on whatever on your next visit, because you are such a valued client of ours and we'd love to have you stay at Hygiene, etc. But it's all kind of down to what you're comfortable with too. The whole thing about clients is that they want to have a clear picture and expectation of their result and their experience. And so however you can best inform that, whether it's through your marketing or it's through outreach or it's through your continued engagement of current clients, I think you'll know what's going to be on brand for you and what they're used to. This isn't full court press on people who have never heard from you before.
What not to do.
Their comfort level. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what not to do would be to disparage that person in any way, or to provide more information than the client needs. All the client needs to know is that person's not available to provide services any longer. Mm-hmm. And if you want to say that they resigned or whatever, I don't think that's going a bridge too far, because otherwise, unless they think that you fired that person, I wouldn't want them to think that it was the person's decision to move on and do something different. And if I were asked, and I've heard this before, I've heard people say, "Oh, I can't tell you where she went."
Yeah, that's weird.
It's like that's just weird and lame, especially in the era of social media, to say that. So, if that person has left information with you, like, I would appreciate it if you would let people know if they ask for me. Be the bigger person, be that ethical salon owner. Don't lie to the clients. Just provide the information. Don't go out of your way. But, if you're asked, be willing to provide it.
That seems reasonable. I mean, I know that there's schools of thought on this that say that if it's an employee-based salon and you as the owner have done all of the marketing to bring those clients in the first place, that you somehow own them. That gets kind of scary using that terminology. But, a client is going to do whatever according to their own prerogative. And if they prefer to go somewhere else, don't have them leave and have a bad taste in their mouth about your business in the process, where now they have to go and, go on this quest and try to figure out where this person went. I think it can also open the door to some potentially iffy reviews that way too.
And you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, that oftentimes these clients will come back, and it may be years from now. They'll follow that person, and then things will happen, and maybe just won't meet the expectations that you had set. I mean, there's a reason why these clients are clients, is that they've come to you in your setting with your employees and the training and products and everything that you've selected. So there's something there, and they may think the grass is greener somewhere else, and you may end up seeing them as clients again.
That's very true. You never know. It all kind of moves cyclically. All right, what else shall we cover in our next 7 minutes? And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, even if it's just to say hey. Facebook user says true. Oh, I like that a lot. I'm just springing this on you, Jamie, but we definitely want to know what types of subject matter you want to learn about in our monthly classes. I know we did a little bit of a survey or a poll in the group in Facebook just to see, what types of things you're focused on. I think after client management, second place was email marketing. So we can definitely get into the nuts and bolts of that. And I think that might be a good one for December, just because you can lay the groundwork and set up your framework for that moving into the new year and kind of starting off fresh. Like everybody, I think right now everybody's on email overload just because of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and just the sheer amount of emails we're receiving. So it can be kind of hard to cut through all that noise. But if that's something that you're interested in, please let me know. Amanda says it's Monday. I think we're all still tired. That is correct. I am tired from doing absolutely nothing for 4 days.
I like the idea of doing an email marketing class because if there's those, well, I know there will be days during the month of December where I will not be working, I will have the time to draft emails. So I like being able to plan ahead and perhaps get maybe half of the calendars set for next year in advance. And you can always go back and swap things out. But yeah, I think it's important. Unfortunately, I think one of the things I'll have to have, and I do have it already, I'll have to update it, is to have that email ready to go in case we do have another shutdown. And then also another email to address, well, what are we going to do about the appointments that we've already scheduled as standings for next year, so that we don't get bombarded with a bunch of individual requests from clients to get in ASAP, when what I really would like to do, if we do end up getting shut down again, is just to pick up from the day that we reopen and just go with whatever schedule's there. And if there are any openings, then I would offer those to my clients based on priority.
That's very cool. And I think that just makes so much less headache and work for you. And I'm sure your clients will appreciate that as well. I just want to give everybody a little peek behind the curtain. We recorded next week's podcast episode this morning, and it's a really good one. I think everybody's really going to enjoy it. It is all about gift cards and best practices, policies, procedures, and actually what we have to do according to federal law, which I think a lot of people don't know about.
Now, I'm really excited because even having had that conversation this morning, I still think there's more work to be done to make it understandable. And not that we didn't get great information, we did, but it's really frustrating how we have to research this as much as we do.
Yes. So hopefully we'll be able to put together a resource for everyone on that. How about a plan for a shutdown calendar? I would love to know more about what you're thinking on a shutdown calendar. Maybe content ideas, email ideas to keep people engaged while you're shut down. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, and unfortunately I can't see your name. Adriana's looking forward to a gift card episode. Hasn't been doing gift cards lately since things are so uncertain. I think that is good strategy for sure. But 'tis the season for gift cards. People want to buy them and give them. So
I can see that we might do a number of questions about gift cards in our next month's Q&A, just because I think it's going to bring up a lot of information. We may end up doing a class on it later too, because I think there are some best practices that cut across the legal, the accounting, the marketing, as we were discussing earlier.
And that could even potentially be a class for the public at some point too. That would be, I mean, there's some stuff that I learned that I was like, wait, what? We have to what? So yeah, good times. All right, well, we are just about at the end of our hour for Q&A. We of course want to be considerate of your time, since it is the evening and I need a cocktail.
Well, I'm looking forward to following up with any of the questions that we may not have answered to your satisfaction. So if there's more information that you want from us about the topics that we covered today, we're just trying to bring to you the things that we see bubbling up, and give you some information, some of our thoughts, and of course those will evolve as we get more information ourselves.
Definitely. I owe a couple of you some messages, so you'll hear from me either tonight or early tomorrow morning. And yeah, this is going to live in the group, and then of course on the Insider's dashboard, along with this month's live class. So we will make sure that, anything that you want a deeper dive on, just let us know and we will hit the ground running. Thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate you attending live. If you're watching the replay, thanks for making it all the way to the end.
Thank you.
All right, bye everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.